I'm Emiliano De Innocenti. I'm working at SISMEL and Fondazione Franceschini in Italy, two research institutions devoted to the study of medieval Latin culture, and I'm in charge of the digital applications over our repertoires, which I'll be presenting in the next slides. But I will focus on our works, our efforts in trying to establish common lists, common authority lists covering shelf marks and authors, name of authors, to reach a high level of interoperability between different databases through this meta search engine that I will show you, that is called the Trame system. So, the broad goal, the final target we want to reach is to build one unified tool that is able to gather information from a number of scholarly resources, meaning resources that have been selected by scholars. So you can imagine to find there valuable information, not anything that you can imagine being on the internet, but selected information. This is the overall architecture of this Trame system. So you have the websites and resources in the internet. You have in the middle this interface between the contents and the users, represented by the Trame meta search engine. And in the end, you have all the visible interfaces, the web pages of the Trame project, and of course you have on the lower part of the slide the users that are supposed to go to the Trame web application searching for authors, for persons with roles, for shelf marks. So they want to have selected information about this kind of things. I said that you can expect to have this information coming from a number of selected repositories. This is only a selection of what's available right now through the Trame system. The catalog of digitized manuscripts at UCLA, the Bodleian Library Manuscripts Catalog, the two Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana resources. So the first is the actual digitization products. The second is the OPAC, the catalog of manuscripts. You can reach both using the Trame environment. Then you have Mandragore. Everyone knows what Mandragore is. La Bibliothèque Nationale de France, through the Gallica manuscripts. The Biblioteca Medicia Laurenziana, which has been completely digitized for the Plute holdings. It's something like 4,000 manuscripts completely digitized with the free printed catalogs from the 18th century by Assemani, Bandini and Viscioni. So you have Syriacs, you have Hebraics, you have Greeks, you have Latin, you have Italian, and so on manuscripts. Then the eCodices virtual library is reachable through the Trame interface. The digital scriptorium from the Columbia University, New York, the Manoscritti Datati d'Italia, so the digital repository of the dated manuscripts in Italy. The project of the IRHT, which you will know, Medium et Jonas, the Ramon Lull database, that is another important repository covering multilingual aspects, because as you know, Ramon Lull wrote in several languages. the Mirabile Digital Archive, the Italian census of manuscripts in public libraries, Manus Online, the BHL, the Scriptorium, Bulletin Codicologique, the Bislam, Calma and Mel repertoires, meaning starting from Mel bibliography, Calma is a bio-bibliographical repertoire of medieval authors, and Bislam is another medieval Latin, sorry. And Bislam is another repertoire index of medieval Latin authors starting from the 6th to the 16th century. This is the interface of the Tram. You have a simple search, a text box, you insert whatever you want, and you launch the query. Launch the query over the selected repositories. Of course, you have also the shelf mark search. You can use the city, library, holding, and shelf mark fields, combining them. For example, you can choose not to use the holding. You can choose to use only the city and library. You can combine them, whatever you want. And then you have the advanced search, and I will focus on authors and titles here. So you can use this set of fields in the column name to perform queries over a number of repositories over the internet. And what you will get is a list of shelf marks contained in a data packet which is similar to what you can read in the column section, which is a subset of the TEIP5 metadata scheme. So the first attempt in establishing authority lists has been with the colleagues at IRHT and led to good results. We had two short-term scientific missions and a number of issues resolved within those two missions, and we now can rely on a big shelf mark list covering the shelf marks provided by SysML, FEF, IRHT, and the Scriptorium Bulletin Codicologique, which is something like almost 200,000 signatures, so it's quite big. This is the rough data structure: country, city, library, holdings, and actual numeric shelf marks. We get into details analyzing the structure of the shelf marks. If one of the institutions use the diphthongs or special characters or the use of articles, many customs that are responsible to the problems of interoperability that, for example, presented this morning our colleague, our Spanish colleague, and also the other colleague from IRHT. So we had a similar number of problems, and we focused on how to solve this kind of issues. This has been the work of the past year, and now we are focusing on a similar attempt, but covering names of authors. And the list were provided by SysML and FEF, by the Geschichtsquellen project run in Munich, and the narrative sources for the medieval Low Countries running in Gand. So Three different repertoires were involved: Bislam, the Geschichtquellen repertoire, and the narrative sources. They were different for a number of reasons. For example, Bislam covers only medieval authors writing in Latin, ranging not from 5th, this is an error, from 6th to 16th century. The Geschichtquellen is focused on the German-speaking area, so authors writing in German, in Hebrew, in Latin, in Dutch, and possibly other languages. The narrative sources is mostly focused on Belgian, Dutch, French, and Latin. So there were a number of different issues to deal with. So we faced the situation in which you have many walled gardens, so non-interoperable services, and you want to reach an high level of interoperability. This is the Bislam archive that you can reach through the Mirabile web application at SYSMEL. In Bislam you can find 15,000 names of authors. You can find also 80,000 variant forms for those names of authors. And all of these forms are coming from 10 years of work of the editorial staff, and they checked standard indexes, catalogs, and lists, journals. It was a huge effort, running for 10 years. The main focus is on Latin. Narrative sources. The list provided contained some 1,000 names with 600 principal forms and roughly 300 variant forms, and mostly Belgian, Dutch, French, and Latin writing authors. And then the list provided by the Geschichtquellen was, first of all, based not on authors but on works. The main focus was works, covering something like 1,000 names without any kind of distinction between principal and variant forms, so it was a flat, something like a flat list. But they were providing an interesting link to Depende, which is one of the most relevant indexes in the German area, and it's an interesting link to enable our list to talk with the VIAF, with the other relevant initiative in this field. The focus was on German, Hebrew, Latin, and Dutch languages. So, this is a summary of the methodology we followed. First of all, we looked for common items. So, what's in common between these three lists? Then we provide normalization of diacritics and other custom graphic features, differentiating the three lists. So one used the umlaut, the other was using diphthongs, another was using vowels with diacritics and so on. So many different graphic features to be normalized in order to get to some result. So another problem we faced was that disambiguate authors, we cannot. We found that we cannot rely on the canon of works, because every repertoire considered only a part of the entire canon. And I will say something more on this in the next slide. This has been due to the different geographic and linguistic focuses of each repertoire. An example of the different spellings of the same name in the three, this is a very basic and simple example in the three repertoires, and on the second line you can see an example of the use of the umlaut in Geschichtquellen and the diphthong in Bislam. Many of this kind of issues were analyzed to get to the actual result. So, to try to resolve the homonyms based on the analysis of the canon of works, we found that while Bislam considered only Latin works for any given author, the Geschichtquellen is supposed to cover all the production, so all languages. But we found that to this general rule they have many exceptions. The narrative sources gave priority to the native language of a given author, and the Latin was rather marginal in this perspective. Then Bislam considered only, as I said, this is a repetition, okay. This is resulting in a really fragmented list of works that was not useful for any serious work of disambiguation between the three lists, because the very same work could be presented with different names across the three different lists we were analyzing. So, for example, for Geschichtquellen and narrative sources, when you cannot rely on an established title, they gave a German or a Dutch title even for Latin works. So you cannot expect to have any kind of comparison, for example, with Bislam, that gives only Latin titles. So we started a manual process of comparison and data curation based on not only lists but on contextual data. So, for example, dates of births and activity, places of activity, and so on. So we get to a normalized canon of works, and then we refined this work with the use of other repertoires and indexes to get to a really formalized list. So we started with 3 building blocks. Our aim is to end up with a unified interface, which is the Trame search engine. We did some mapping between the 3 different lists, and we found that, for example, comparing Bislam with the Geschichtquellen, we found a number of authors in common. 1,100 authors in common. This is a rough summary. No, 800 shared items out of 1,100 authors without variant forms for the Geschichtquellen and a number 88,000 records for the Bislam. So, for Bislam and narrative sources with a similar process, we found out 287 shared common items. And comparing the Geschichtquellen with the narrative sources list, we found only 91 shared items. So, not so much. If we compare the three lists on the basis of what we of our analysis, we find out that only 83 common items could be found across these three lists. This is an example of the final list we got with this analysis. And then we end up with what? With a shared list with all the forms provided by the three different databases and references to the Pende and the BIAF authority lists. This list is now in progress of being integrated in the Trame system to act as a support for the user research. Support means smart autocomplete tool with the features like, for example, the suggestions and so on. And most important, to use the right variant to search for the selected databases. So the list is able to instruct the system on which variant to send to the database to find the data within the database. And then, most important, we are trying to set up a semantic pipeline to populate the ontology behind Trame with the data coming directly from the list and from the process that I will show you in a moment. This process is based on what I call the semantic pipeline, which is composed by a search and crawl tool, by a semantic knowledge base, by some tool for named entities extraction and recognition, and by a system for the curation and the validation of the data, so to extend the initial knowledge base, semantic knowledge base. So, the ontology, with the names of authors coming from the three projects, will represent all the names and variants, and will link with other contextual information coming from repertoires, index, and so on. This is only an example of the models we are working on to represent our knowledge. These are a bunch of relations we are working on to make the ontology work. And this is the most important thing we are working on actually. Trame, since a few months ago, was only a meta search facility. Now we implemented a new, we call it a semantic pipeline, that is able to populate an ontology with available data that the system is able to fetch on the external system directly in connection with the searches of the user. So the user launches a search, a query, with the name of an author. The name of the author has the variants, and the system is able to fulfill the request immediately of the user and to instruct a parallel process to fetch this information outside in a number of websites and to collect this in the semantic tripod store, waiting to be evaluated, waiting to be curated, waiting to be validated by human researcher to extend, to enlarge the semantic knowledge base. So this is roughly what we have done up to these days. If you want to have some other detail, the system is online. I can provide you an access to the developer website, and if you have questions, I will be more than happy to answer.